He thinks I'm invisible. That's always been his thing. Looking right through me like I'm furniture, like I'm background noise in a story that's actually about him. My brother has always been the star of our family, the oldest son. The one who went to state school on a partial scholarship and turned it into a whole personality. The one who came back home to our small Michigan town with a business degree, a new girlfriend, and an absolute certainty that he was better than everyone who stayed. I stayed. That was my first crime, according to him. My name is Alicia. I'm 32 years old. I have 2 kids, my daughter Emma, who is 10, and my son Tyler, who is 7. I do freelance accounting work for small businesses, and I have for the past 8 years. I was sitting at work, eating a sad runny was before the kids wake up, or late at night after they go to bed. I drive a 2019 Honda Pilot with a cracked side mirror I keep meaning to fix. I buy my clothes at Target and sometimes at the thrift store on 5th Street because I genuinely like it. Not because I have to. My brother's name is Connor. He's 38. He runs a mid-size commercial landscaping company that services corporate parks and office complexes across the greater Detroit area. He has a nice truck. He has a house in a newer subdivision with a brick front and a 3-car garage. He talks about revenue projections at Thanksgiving dinner. He once told my mother, in front of me, that I had wasted my potential because I didn't go back to get my CPA license. I have my CPA license. I got it 4 years ago. I just didn't feel the need to announce it. That's the thing about me and Connor. He announced nothing. And somewhere along the way, he decided that silence meant failure. Our mom's 65th birthday was in October. She wanted a dinner at her house, nothing fancy, just family. Pot roast, her green bean casserole, the pick and buy she's been making since I was 5. My aunt and uncle drove in from Traverse City. My cousin and his wife came. Connor came with his wife Melissa and their 3 kids. I came with Emma and Tyler and a bottle of wine and the pecan pie backup that mom asked me to bring because she wasn't sure hers would be big enough. Everything started fine. It always does. We were maybe 40 minutes into dinner when Connor started talking about his business. He does this. Fills silence with himself. He just landed a new contract, a large one, for a corporate campus in Dearborn. He was explaining the square footage, the crew size, the projected annual value of the account. My uncle was nodding. My aunt was asking polite questions. My mom was smiling because her son was successful and she loves him. I was cutting Tyler's meat because he still struggles with the knife. And I was half listening. The way you do with a television you've already seen 100 times. Then Connor said something that made me stop. He was in the middle of describing how he'd beaten out 2 other bidders for the Dearborn contract, and he said, and I remember this exactly because I've replayed it many times, you know what it takes to win in business? You have to be the kind of person who actually goes out and builds something. Not everyone's cut out for that. Some people just don't have what it takes. He wasn't looking at me when he said it. He was looking at my uncle. But my aunt was looking at me. I picked up my fork and kept eating. Then my daughter looked up from her plate. Emma is 10 and she is observant in a way that sometimes catches me off guard. She said, "Are you talking about Mom?" The table went quiet. Connor laughed. It was the kind of laugh that's designed to make you feel like you're overly acting. No, sweetheart. I'm talking about business. Oh, Emma said, because it sounded like you were saying Mom didn't build anything. Connor looked at me then. He had this expression, patient, almost pitying, that I had seen my entire childhood. Alicia does her thing, he said. We all do our thing. What does Alicia do? My aunt asked. Genuinely curious. She doesn't know the specifics of my work. Connor answered before I could. She does bookkeeping. For like local shops and stuff. He picked up his fork. It's a good fit. Not everyone needs to be running a company. Tyler looked up at me. He didn't fully understand what was happening, but he understood tone. Kids always understand tone. His eyes were a little uncertain, like he was checking to see if I was okay. I smiled at him and rubbed his back once. Emma did not smile. She had her fork set down on her plate and she was looking at her uncle with an expression that was somewhere between confused and hurt. Her eyes were getting glassy. "Mom works really hard," she said quietly. "Of course she does, honey," Connor said, in the voice adults use when they're dismissing children. "That's great." Emma looked at me, and I saw it happen. I saw the moment it landed on her. The understanding that the adults in the room had just told her, in the most civilized possible way, that her mother didn't count. Her chin wobbled. She looked back down at her plate. I put my hand over hers under the table. I did not make a scene. I did not raise my voice. I did not explain myself to my brother in my mother's dining room on her 65th birthday, with her pot roast getting cold on everyone's plates. But I made a decision. Later that night, after I got the kids to bed in my old childhood room, Emma on the twin bed, Tyler on the air mattress, both of them finally asleep, I sat in my car in my parents' driveway and I made 3 phone calls. Now I need to back up, because for any of this to make sense, you need to understand something about how I got here. When I was 24, I got divorced. My ex-husband and I had been together since college, married at 22, and by 24, we both knew it had been a mistake. No drama, no affair, just 2 people who had grown into entirely different people. He moved to Seattle. We are still friendly. He pays his child support on time and he flies out twice a year to see the kids. After the divorce, I moved back to Michigan. I had Emma, who was 2. I had about $14,000 in savings. I had a bachelor's degree in business administration and a lot of experience doing invoicing and payroll for a manufacturing company where I'd worked before I had Emma. Connor made a comment at the time. "At least you have something to fall back on." Like bookkeeping was a consolation prize. Like coming home was defeat. I started picking up clients slowly. A bakery, a small landscaping company, not Connor's, a different one, a hair salon, a physical therapy practice. Word spread the way it does in small towns. By the time Tyler was born 3 years later, different relationship, also over, different story, I had 11 regular clients and I was making more per hour than I ever had at the manufacturing company. I was sitting at work, eating a sad lunch. I was sitting at work, eating a sad granola phone. I started with index funds, small amounts, consistent contributions. Then I got more specific. I was sitting at work, eating a sad granola fad lunch. With Sam's more dramatic than it was. I wasn't buying office towers. I was researching REITs, then private placements, then eventually a small syndication group that a client of mine was part of. My client was a woman named Harriet. She was 70 years old and she had spent 40 years building a small empire in commercial property management in southeastern Michigan. She was sharp and funny and she did not waste words. She let me into one deal as a limited partner, then another, then another. 3 years ago, Harriet asked me if I wanted to be part of a larger acquisition, a small office complex in Dearborn. The numbers made sense. I had the funds. I signed the papers. I own a 22% stake in that complex through an LLC called Greenvale Holdings. Connor's new contract, the big one he was crowing about at dinner, the corporate campus in Dearborn he'd beaten 2 competitors to win, is located inside that complex. He has been mowing the lawns, trimming the hedges, and maintaining the grounds of a building that I partially own for the past 4 months. He doesn't know. He knows the property manager, a man named David who handles day-to-day operations. He has no reason to know the names of the ownership group. I am just a name on a filing in Lansing. So, the 3 phone calls. The first was to Harriet. I told her what had happened at dinner. She was quiet for a moment and then she said, "What do you want to do?" I told her. She said, "I'll have David reach out Monday morning." The second call was to my attorney, just to make sure what I was planning was entirely within my rights. It was. The third call was to my ex-husband in Seattle because I needed to hear a voice that would just listen without making it about themselves. He listened. He said, "Do it." He knew about the investment. He'd watched me build it. Monday morning came. David, the property manager, sent Connor's company a formal letter. It was polite. It informed him that the ownership group of the complex had decided to review all vendor contracts at the end of the current quarter and that a meeting would be held with the primary stakeholders to discuss renewal terms. Stakeholders. Plural. Connor called my mother on Monday afternoon to complain about it, which I know because my mother called me. Your brother's upset, she said. Something about a contract review. He says they're being difficult. I said. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday. I called David and confirmed that I'd be attending in person. As a member of the ownership group, he confirmed the location and time. I was a blazer and real shoes, which for me is essentially a costume, and I drove to Dearborn on a Thursday morning and parked in a structure and walked into a conference room. Connor was already there when I walked in. He was in his company polo and he had a folder in front of him with printouts of his service record. He was talking to David, probably running through his talking points, and then he looked toward the door. He saw me. I watched his face go through about 6 different expressions in 4 seconds. Confusion. Recognition. Confusion again. Something starting to look like the beginning of a very bad feeling. Alicia, he said. Why are you here? I own part of this building, I said. Have a seat, Connor. He did not immediately sit. He looked at David. David looked at his paperwork. I sat down. I opened my own folder. It had the LLC documentation, my ownership percentage, and the current vendor agreement with Connor's company, which I had reviewed over the weekend. I don't understand, Connor said. He finally sat. You own? What do you mean? 22% of Greenvale Holdings, which owns this complex, I said. I've been a limited partner for 3 years. I became more active in operations decisions this fall. He stared at me. Since when do you do real estate? Since I was 26, I said. I just didn't feel the need to announce it. The meeting was professional. I want to be clear about that. I did not humiliate him. I did not bring up the birthday dinner or what he'd said about Emma. I did not say a word about failure or potential or bookkeeping. I didn't need to. We discussed the vendor contract. His service had been adequate, not exceptional, but adequate. There were a few issues with crew scheduling in September that had drawn complaints from a tenant. David had the records. Connor acknowledged them and offered explanations that were partially valid and partially deflection. I asked questions, real questions, about response time and winter maintenance protocols and crew certification. Connor answered them. He called me Alicia at first, and then, somewhere in the middle of the meeting, he stopped using my name at all. At the end, I told him that the ownership group would be in touch by the following Monday with our decision about renewal. He stood up when I stood up. He started. Can I talk to you for a minute? I said sure. David excused himself. Connor looked at me across the table. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, how much of this did you build while I was doing bookkeeping for local shops? I said it evenly, not mean, just clean. He had the grace to look at the table. Emma heard everything you said, I told him. She cried in the car on the way home. She asked me if she should be worried about money. She's 10 years old. He looked up. I told her we were fine, I said. Because we are fine. We have always been fine. But she needed to hear that from me because of what you said at Mom's dinner table. Connor opened his mouth. Closed it. I'm not here to punish you, I said. The contract decision will be fair. It will be based on performance and pricing, same as it would be for anyone. But I needed you to know. I needed you to see it. He nodded slowly. He looked older than he had on Thursday at dinner. Less certain. We renewed his contract. I want you to know that because it's true. The group voted and the renewal made business sense. His pricing was competitive and replacing him mid-winter with Michigan weather coming would have been disruptive for the tenants. We renewed it with a modified performance clause that David drafted, which Connor agreed to without complaint. But something changed. He called me 2 weeks later. He asked if he could take me and the kids to lunch. I said yes, but I was honest with Emma about what the lunch was for. I said, Uncle Connor wants to apologize. I used that word specifically. I thought she deserved to know it was coming so she could decide how she felt about it before we sat down. She thought about it for a minute and then she said, Okay, does he know I'm smart? I said. He's learning. She nodded like that was an acceptable answer, and she went back to whatever she was drawing. At lunch, Connor ordered Emma's favorite. She has a thing for grilled cheese. Very specific, white bread, American cheese, a little crispy. And he asked her about school. She told him about her science project, which was a model of the water cycle. She is thorough, and she explained it in more detail than most adults would have the patience for. Connor listened the whole time. Before we left, he looked at Emma and said, "Hey, I'm sorry for what I said at Grandma's birthday. That wasn't right." Emma looked at him for a second. "Which part?" she asked. He blinked. "All of it," he said. She shrugged in the way only 10-year-olds can. The shrug that means forgiveness is possible. But trust is still pending, and she went back to her grilled cheese. I paid for lunch. He tried to pick up the check, and I beat him to it without making it a thing, just slid my card to the edge of the table before he saw it coming. He laughed. A real one, not the dismissive kind. First real laugh I'd heard from him in years. I'm not going to tell you we're suddenly close. We're not. There are years of smaller moments, smaller comments, the whole cumulative weight of being the sibling who was quietly looked down on. That doesn't dissolve over a grilled cheese lunch. It just starts, maybe, to get lighter. What I will tell you is this. Emma came home from that lunch and went straight back to her drawing. Tyler ran into the backyard to chase the dog, and I sat at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee and my laptop open to a quarterly report from Harriet's group, and I felt something that I don't have a perfect word for. Not victory, not vindication, exactly. Something quieter than that. I have spent 8 years building something in the margins. Before the kids woke up, after they went to bed, during nap times and school pickups, and in the parking lot of Tyler's soccer practice on my phone while other parents talked on the sideline. I did it without a press release. I did it without anyone watching. My brother thought silence was the same as nothing. It isn't. Emma knocked on my office door that night around 9, which is past her bedtime, but I don't enforce it hard when she's in a thoughtful mood. She had her hair in a braid she'd done herself, a little crooked. She leaned in the doorway and said, "Mom, are you actually a business person?" I looked at her over my laptop. "Yeah," I said. "I am." She considered this. "I thought you just did numbers." "The numbers are the business," I said. She stood there for another second. Then she said, "I want to learn investing." I closed my laptop. "Sit down," I said. "Let's start now." She pulled up my office chair, the good one, the one I bought myself when I hit a certain milestone 3 years ago. And she sat across from me, and I opened a fresh document, and I started from the beginning. She was asleep in the chair by 9:45. I carried her to bed, crooked braid and all, but she had asked. And that was everything. The night Emma fell asleep in my office chair, I sat there for a few minutes before I carried her to bed. I just looked at her, the crooked braid, her mouth a little open, her hand still loosely curled like she'd been holding a pencil. She had asked me to teach her investing. She was 10 years old, and she had asked me that, and I don't think she understood yet what it meant to me that she did. I've thought a lot about what actually happened with Connor. Not the meeting, not the contract, the longer thing underneath it. He didn't become dismissive overnight. It built up over years, little comment by little comment, the accumulated weight of someone deciding what you are before you finished becoming it. And I let it happen, not because I was weak, but because I was busy. Busy building, busy raising 2 kids. Busy doing the unglamorous, invisible work that doesn't come with a press release or a LinkedIn post or a moment at the dinner table where everyone turns to look at you. That invisibility was a choice. I'm clear on that now. I chose to build quietly because I didn't need the validation. But I think somewhere I forgot that the people who love me, my daughter especially, were watching to understand what being a woman who works hard actually looks like. And when Connor filled that silence with his version of me, Emma didn't have enough evidence yet to push back. She just hurt. That's the part I sit with. Not anger at my brother. Just the recognition that doing right by yourself isn't enough. The people in your corner need to see it too. At least sometimes. What I know about how life tends to work, And this isn't something anyone taught me directly. It's something I've watched play out over and over. Is that the way you treat people has a way of catching up to you? Not as punishment, not as some cosmic scorekeeping, just as consequence. Connor spent years underestimating me. That underestimation led him to not ask questions. Not asking questions led him to not know who he was actually in business with. The gap between what he assumed and what was true was one he built himself, over years, one dismissive comment at a time. I'm not interested in holding that over him. The lunch happened. He apologized to Emma. She accepted it on her own terms. The way 10-year-olds do, honestly, without ceremony, but also without pretending it didn't happen. That's its own kind of integrity, and I think she came to it naturally. What I want for her, what I want for Tyler too, is that they grow up understanding that intelligence isn't just about being clever. It's about being curious enough to keep learning past the point where you're comfortable. That character isn't about being perfect, it's about what you do when you've done something wrong and you know it. And that persistence, the kind that doesn't need an audience, that shows up at 5 in the morning before the kids wake up and keeps going even when no one is watching, that's the thing that actually builds a life. Emma wants to learn investing. We'll start simple. Compound interest, time in the market. The idea that small, consistent actions accumulate into something real over years. She'll probably get bored by the third session and go back to her drawings. That's fine. The door is open now. She knows it's possible. She knows her mother did it. That's what I want her to carry. Not the revenge part, not the meeting in Dearborn, not Connor's face when I walked through that conference room door. Just the quiet knowledge that what you build in the margins when no one is watching is still real. It still counts. It's still yours.